The idea behind innovation ops is to move it from innovation management, which is really kind of passive, I'm managing something, to how do you operationalize innovation in a way throughout your organization. What you're really trying to do is connect the processes and bring people collaboratively into the mix.
From your experience, and maybe let's narrow it down to just tech SaaS companies, for example, are there any key processes that really work with innovation ops setup?
The other thing that doesn't get talked about in a lot of tech areas is how do you roll those things up?
Welcome. This is an Hour of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Lyoshin. Mike Bauer joins me today to discuss the Innovations Ops framework, a framework that combines cultural philosophies, practices, people, and tools to increase an organization's ability to deliver innovations efficiently and effectively. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Vid. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. So before we jump in, could you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I've got about 35 plus years of experience of creating products and companies in software, hardware, and services. I've worked for big Fortune 20 companies and I've started a few companies of my own and have been a participant. My sweet spot is small to mid-sized companies. I really enjoy that size. My focus has been really about creating and going to market with product services and companies. I have an engineering background that I went to the dark side, which is the business side, and kind of went from products to building organizations and companies. So I kind of seen a lot of different things over the years, worked in a lot of different industries over the years. The last place I was chief product officer of a company focused on innovation and innovation ops and innovation management as their chief product officer, and helped them grow and kind of realign their company and ended up with a successful acquisition by a PE firm. And so now that was about it was finalized beginning of this year, and so. Right now, I'm just enjoying life and relaxing a little bit, but also advising a variety of software companies, a couple startups, a couple mid-sized companies around product strategy and execution. Everything from figuring out what you need to how do we, help the leaders grow. So.
Okay, great. So why don't we start with answering the question of what innovation ops is?
Yeah.
And how is it different from like traditionally what people think of innovation and product management?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things I want to point out as we talk through that this is based on probably close to 100 plus interviews, a lot of it driven by Sophion when I was a part of them, but also just through my experience. And one of the things I want to back up is right now, part of the problem we see in innovation, if you want to call it that, I think innovation is more what you do, not categorizing it and saying that's a group that does stuff. But in 2022, roughly $2.4 trillion was spent fundamentally in R&D and other types of things. And that money is spent to innovate. Probably doesn't even count process work and others at other companies. If you ask, and McKinsey asked all these executives, how happy are they with their innovation and output and outcomes and spend? 94% of them were dissatisfied. And then if you look at PDMA, when they actually measure success of innovation, meaning using new product, success of the market as a metric, 50% in even best cases were what people were getting. And so if you think about that, that's $1.2 trillion in 2022 that was wasted. Not saying you can fix all of those things, but that's a low percentage. That's a lot of money going to innovation. And so the idea behind innovation ops is to come back to your question, is move it from innovation management, which is really kind of passive, I'm managing something, to how do you operationalize innovation in a way throughout your organization that whether it's innovation incremental or just something internally to innovation, breakthrough, new business, and those, how do you operationalize that so that you actually up your percentages of getting innovation out, staying ahead of the market? Because if you look at all this research and people's discussions, innovation is how they see you generate competitive advantage. And so the idea behind innovation ops is really about how do you operationalize innovation. It doesn't mean a specific process or throw out everything you've been doing. It's about operational. It's very similar for those that are in the software world. What happened when DevOps kind of started really coming to its own. It was about operationalizing development, not just writing good code and but how do I get it out? How do I get feedback? How do I make it a system and a process that the company does, not some group? So really what we're talking about with innovation ops is driving innovation throughout the organization and making it as an embedded part of the culture with set processes, regardless of which ones you want to pick. That's up to kind of you and your context, but also then how do you move that throughout the organization? Some of the clients I've worked with in past lives, you look at what if it's some little group that does it, that sometimes works. But to get products and services out the door takes the village. It takes everybody, right? You don't just build something and throw it over the wall and then somebody manufactures it. The best companies have brought that together as a system. And some of the clients, interviewed and as we developed these ideas, they were running with those and got material changes in how they were innovating and getting new products into the market in that particular case.
I see. So it's basically shifting mentality from just organizing a group of people to do some project or whatever to innovate short term or one time, rather than embed it in your whole organization and have it running across everything. Like kind of like what they do with value streams and innovation at every step.
Yeah, very, very. Yeah, value streams can be part of that whole framework. I mean, at the highest level, what you're really bringing together are people getting the work done with very specific processes, challenges to make it explicit. And then what brings that together is an understanding and thinking about the jobs it takes to get those things from initial strategy all the way through to market to obsolescence. And when I talk about jobs, it isn't, that you're a product manager doing a product and I'm, manufacturing, building something. When we're talking about jobs, it's jobs to be done, and it is not role or organization or people or title dependent. So there are very specific jobs that you're looking to make effective. And at the highest level, you can break it down to 5 things: managing strategy, managing portfolios, and then managing discovery, which some people like to call ideation, managing products, and managing projects. And depending on your company, maybe you don't have products. So, okay, you don't have to do that piece. But when you think about it in those frames, that's where it comes together.
Okay. So I had a question about this, so let's just jump into this. So for these jobs to be done, so you mentioned those 5 categories. How are they different from what current roles exist in the organization? Like they have product managers, project managers, some other executives.
Yeah. Some are very different. If you're a project manager, you're managing projects. That's your job. Where it gets interesting is when you start thinking about managing discovery or strategy or even managing products. Even if you don't have a hard good product or a software product. Somebody's doing some of these jobs, like managing pricing, managing a roadmap, managing discovery of customer needs. One of the companies I've worked with, their managing discovery was, basically the marketing people. They didn't have titles of, product manager and those. They had somebody that their job was looking at the sales data and looking at, broad, consumer trends and picking on areas where they could, do the analysis, do what they're, do manage discovery work. That would say, here's the services and products, this was a candy company, products that we want to have, or types of products we want to have. But they didn't have that title. If you're thinking about innovating a process within your own company, there's not probably somebody that's managing, there may be somebody managing the process, but there's not somebody that's managing discovery. Could be, in the old days, the Toyota, factory floor, it could be just the worker pulling the Kanban and saying, this is what I think we need to do differently. Yeah. So the ideas behind these jobs are they're getting done regardless of title. Somebody's doing a lot of these things. And then when you look at portfolio management as another example, certain size companies have portfolio managers that are managing portfolios of projects and products. But in a lot of companies, the strategy portfolio of the people, the time, and the money, or the resources, are managed by different executives. They could be the division manager that says, this is my portfolio of things I'm gonna use. Because it comes down to, what it always comes down to is time, talent, and treasure. It's how much time are you investing? What are your people and the talent you have to create those things, and the treasure? It could be money, it could be resources, it could be literally space on a factory floor. Those are what portfolio people are managing. And you look on LinkedIn and portfolio managers, there's not many. I know in the finance world, when you're looking at, Fidelity and those, there's portfolio managers, but I'm talking about the broad term of portfolios.
It's a different one.
Yeah.
So it's like, for example, in Scrum, we have roles, right? We, for example, don't have those jobs. Like, sometimes it matches with the job and job description or job title, but sometimes it doesn't. Like product owner, for example. It's very, like, anybody basically can play that role if they understand the industry and how to do product development. So
and that's a real hard thing to get your kind of head wrapped around when you look at innovation ops. It's not, the idea behind innovation ops is more about operationalizing, understanding the processes, and picking. It's less, as you roll it out in an organization, it's more about being explicit. Well, who's doing those things? And what you find also a lot of times, those jobs are uncovered, meaning somebody isn't doing them, or they're not doing, they're not explicitly part of their job. They're just kind of like, somebody asked me how we price these things, so this is how we do it. So, and again, some of these jobs, in smaller companies, software company, product manager, the kinds I like, that some of the product managers are business managers too, and they do pricing and competitive and margin analysis and these sort of things. And other companies, they don't. Somebody else does those things. It's in finance, and it comes across.
So how does the innovation ops encourage this setup? Is it like somebody, like it's like a cross-functional team and all these different people responsible for their job or part of the process? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, I think the idea of value streams is probably a good one too. The idea behind innovation ops from a high level is, within each of these jobs, there are specific processes. And if you're this is not, look, this type of change is not going to completely be driven from the bottoms up. It's the thing with innovation ops is you're trying to operationalize this. This is a big change management problem. And so there's executives that need to own these things to make sure they're explicit. But what you're really trying to do is connect the processes and bring people collaboratively into the mix and add the transparency instead of just one of the customers we worked with before they really started down this journey, it was like, well, we thought up the new thing over here. And then we told manufacturing about it, when we're all ready, and manufacturing goes and does a bunch of stuff. And then, the sales team goes and gets it put in stores. And what changed is how do you collaboratively build the teams and keep them informed? Doesn't mean everybody has to sit on, a team to go from start to finish. But as things progress, and they used a mix of agile and stage gate, as things progressed, those teams had the information because it was transparent, and then they could pick things up knowing where it was. But they also got the big picture of here's where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so the change management part of this is to connect these processes together so it becomes a flow, and it's very context and company specific. So you can't, there's not one size fits all. In this particular company, they used agile in some of their creating part, and they use stage gate to make sure things were hitting certain hurdles because they had manufacturing facilities.
Yeah.
And before I go invest $10 million, I want to make sure certain things are done, right?
Yeah.
Other companies, it's all agile, and it just flows from one end. It looks, like a DevOps process.
Yeah. So since we're talking about these processes, and you're saying there is no cookie cutter for this, but from your experience, and maybe let's narrow it down to just tech SaaS companies, for example, are there any key processes that really work with innovation ops setup?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at tech, I think the experience base is some form of agile where they're using Scrum, Kanban. I think the other area, especially in tech products, and this is software and hardware. Now, hardware will tend to have a little bit of a gate feeling because you got to hit certain milestones for them to do certain things. You got to have hardware design done before you do, environmental. But it still follows more of an agile process. I think the other processes around that is beginning to get talked about a lot is discovery. And it's more than creating a list of ideas from your customers or whatever. It's truly understanding customer need and pain points. Again, if you like jobs to be done, that's great. If you like some other framework for doing it, great. But at the end of the day, it's the result. What matters is you understand those customer needs so that it isn't just, hey, we talked to 3 customers and they think they'll buy something. But you really understand that and then flow that through. And I think the other processes on the development side, and especially on software, is the processes that have really taken hold around DevOps. I mean, that was part of the analogy as we were thinking through innovation ops. DevOps has had a material change in the output of development organizations for successful introduction of software. But it goes back to the beginning. Do you know your customers want, right, and need? But I think in those frames, that's important. The other thing that doesn't get talked about in a lot of tech areas is how do you roll those things up? So here are the things we're working on that are new, maybe new products, new extensions, development work going on over in project. There are a bunch of projects, and as you know, software is a never-ending project, so it just continues. Yeah. But it's still a project. And then how do you formally manage those products? The thing that doesn't get talked about is how do I manage that as a portfolio for even a small company? If you have 1 or 2 products, the chief product officer or VP of products, or however you're titled, really needs to start thinking about, and this is a key area, is thinking about their portfolio. Where are they putting bets? Where are they putting their time and energy? I've seen that firsthand in my leadership roles of how do I make sure keep the existing products going and innovating and move forward with the other things. And it really is moving those three levers around.
Yeah.
And I think that's an area that probably needs a fair amount of work in terms of portfolios and managing and how do I roll this information up, because a lot of these now are using point tools that don't talk together. And there's really been, until fairly recently, not a lot of good tools for product people. There's been project management tools, Atlassian and the similar and project management tools. And then there's some stuff in discovery going on. There's nothing really in the middle of how do I manage all the aspects of me as a product person. And that's starting to come out. We're seeing software hitting the market, but not as much on the portfolio side. And then probably the one that's probably the biggest nut to crack, I think, is around managing strategy. It's not so much about creating the strategy, but how do I frame it? How do I communicate it? How do I bring it through the organization so that those that are pulling those levers keep aligned all the way up and down the organization? And that's an area that there's only a few people starting to think about how do I manage that aspect. And it can get real complicated, right? $20 billion company, that's a lot of strategies to manage, but even small, mid-sized companies, it's not as easy as it sounds, just because you have your strategy document and your principles and things. I mean, I've worked in a lot of small, 100-person companies, and then it's a constant communication. So I think that's another area that you'll see, and that's tech and beyond. But
yeah. So while you're speaking all about this, I'm thinking, I don't know of any way how people now check how things are going other than having those like quarterly meetings or yearly planning meetings or things like that. So that's not so much for agile process or like that continuous flow and changing your behavior or changing your priorities based on what's happening in the world. Are there any success metrics or any like periodic check-ins in the innovation ops flow processes?
Not specifically. I mean, I think that becomes what's your cadence within the companies you're within, right? If you're a software company, your cadence is probably daily, weekly, monthly, especially if you're getting to continuous delivery of software. I think in other companies where you're a little more stage gate oriented or in between, I think it's the check-ins are different. What I think is happening with these tools, though, is this what gets missed is there's communication down and people are working. These tools we're starting to see them get connected in ways that I can feed that information up. Many of some of the customers I've worked with, they're starting to manage their portfolios and having that information at the ready. So if I'm getting warning signals over here in projects that this project's getting off the rails, that you see that flow up. Or if the market is turning in a different way and you need to make tweaks, how do I flow that down? But I'm not sure I have a good answer for that particular question.
Okay, that's fine. So another element of this framework is culture and philosophy, and basically how is it different from a traditional company? I would say when they implement innovation ops.
Yeah, I think what really fundamentally changes is more explicit, like these are the processes we're using and this is how it connects. What you see, what you get out of implementing that is a lot more adaptability and agility. You're driving a more collaborative culture. So you're fundamentally changing those stovepipes, or the various barriers between organizational elements, and you're trying to it's more of a process and operational flow than an organizational stovepiping flow. And so what you're trying to do is make those fundamental changes. So you're trying to make innovation understood by everyone in the business. It touches pretty much everybody, or they all should know where it's coming. I think that's how you kind of, it's hard to I'm trying to figure out the right word. The other thing that you're trying to change at the same time is continuous learning. So as you put these things in here, you're putting the feedback loops to make it continuous learning and adapting. So no matter how, you've done this in the software world, no matter how good the software is, you're going to iterate. And you need to do the same thing to operationalize this. You need to get that culture of learning and transparency and engagement that you're focused on. That these things are what we do. These are how we constantly improve it. I think the other thing that comes from it, and this is where the tools come in, is knowledge sharing. How do I share this knowledge and information in a way that people can make it actionable, depending on which jobs you're trying to accomplish? And I think the other thing is one of the hardest parts is the openness and transparency. That's why I said right at the beginning, what you're really talking about is a major cultural shift. And so you have to put know you're doing that, and know it's a change management problem that's going to be across the company. It doesn't mean you have to start with the ginormous, okay, we're changing all 300,000 people of ours. You can start small, but at the end of the day, somebody is making changes. You're changing people's behavior and how they approach their work. And I think that's the trick. But I've seen it happen where people have over the years have done that, and they start seeing the benefit.
Yeah, it's always hard to do this, especially when you have some not believers in the organization and people sabotage or whatever. But I guess over time, if you have more and more people buying in and using the system, then it will sort itself out.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, it's not all tools based. I mean, you can't go out and run out and buy the biggest piece of software and then we're now doing it. Because at the end of the day, if people aren't using it, they aren't, as you said, they're kind of like, I don't really need to do that. And so these transformations, it is a transformation and it takes time. But the benefit of that is, you're speeding up your time to market. You're improving your performance over your portfolios. There's business outcomes, because that's the other thing you're trying to do with innovation ops, is tie it to business outcomes. There's people that call some of these things we do as innovation theater. That is meaning it's just not really tied to feels good metrics, or I got this group that does stuff over here, and then when they do something, they throw it over the wall. If you look at the companies that innovate, and some of them are the ones we hear every day: Apple, Amazon, and others. I mean, that's culturally what they do. They may have that. I mean, they're big organizations, but in general, they're in it. They're doing stuff every day. If you look at PDMA's Organizational Innovators of the Year awards for the organizations, you start seeing that as a theme. It's culturally a part of it. They've made that transformation where it's collaborative, it's lean, it's learning based, those sort of things.
Yeah. So let's touch a little bit on tools. Are there any specific ones that work the best, again, in the tech software world, that maybe you've seen from your experience? Or some maybe that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into plugging specific companies. That's one of the things we were trying to do with Sophion and our suite of tools. I think you see Atlassian trying to do that. There are point solutions out there. I think in general, monoliths that try to do it all aren't kind of a proven model. That's what you don't want to do. But I think if you look at some of the tooling out there, even if you look at some of the stuff Miro is doing, I think it's Miro or Mural, or doing to help innovators go from start through. I think the tools are what you're using, and then what are you missing, and looking for those missing elements. And again, it's size too. I mean, if you're 50, 100 person company, you might be able to do this with, a software company, you might be able to do it with Atlassian and some spreadsheets. There's a lot of us, cobbled together with, one of the things we found is, Microsoft and Google Docs are, the primary, Google apps. I don't think that's a long-term solution, but, it depends on cost and other things. I think you can look at some of the big people like Atlassian and Miro and some of those that have more of a broader picture. Even Smart Sheets and some of those are starting to add more and more pieces that allow you to flow the information together. With open APIs, with a lot of these things, you can bring the data back and forth to where you need it. My suggestion would be is you find the tools that work and then pull them together, and not try to do it yourself. Some of these things, managing some of these jobs is pretty complicated stuff, and you need tool. That's why I like the point solutions better, because they focus on very specific sets of problems and not try to do it. Generic tools like Excel and those kind of work, but you spend a lot of time, curating the information. Same thing with things like SharePoint. You can dump a lot of stuff into those things. But I think you need solutions that bring you through those and then make sure the data gets to the right place.
Yeah. What do you think about AI starting playing a role in all of this, and maybe automating some of it or optimizing it in a way?
I think they have large roles, and having been around a fair amount of AI and machine learning stuff over my years, I kind of try to separate it. I realize generative AI is exploded in the last 3 years. And I think if you look at generative AI, I think there's a lot of work it can do to help and speed up things like discovery, analyzing lots of information coming in through those efforts. In pure product management sense, it can help you write personas and job statements. If you're a jobs to be done person, it can write a nice, picture perfect Scrum, card. Where I think you have to be careful is those things are based on a lot of knowledge that it's already picked up and learned in its models. I do wonder if you just rely on those things, are you really going to help innovate and think through things differently? So I think they become helpful tools to do those sort of things. I think the thing that's getting missed is the stuff, the other types of AI that are more predictive or prescriptive, where it's more analytically driven with machine learning and very specific models. I think those things can also have a lot of value for predicting outcomes or giving you early warning that something is coming off the rails. Very hard to do, needs a lot of training and data, but even basic benchmarking and in looking at lots of data analytically with those kind of machine learning tools can really help with like managing portfolios and optimizing those, which is a different space than pure generative AI. Right. So I think there's room for both, and I think they're going to be. But I also have hired enough product managers that if you just run this stuff through generative AI discussion stuff, I get it, and you can kind of tell. But have you done the work to really understand the needs and make the trade-offs and all of those sort of things? So there's some of it still requires, I think, gray matter to connect dots and things maybe uniquely. And I could be proven wrong, but I think they're handy tools. It's like any tool, right? I can use a hammer to pound a nail in, or bash a hole in the wall. I'm not sure which. I think you should use the tool for what it's intended for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm sure I'm not making some people happy with those comments, but I think I think there's all kinds of technology leaps, that we've seen over the years that have really helped. I think I tend to go back to principles. Like, can you use those tools and those technologies to do base principles? I'm a product guy, so discovery, managing projects, working with development to get those things done. Can you use those tools to do the interactions and the cultural things needed to make those things successful over time?
Yeah. No, I agree that every tool should be used for its purpose and not just be used because it's a fancy thing or hype or anything of that.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with, adding it into functionality. I realize we like to sprinkle, AI fairy dust on everything we do, but it has to serve a purpose and a need. We had the same problem with cloud. Everything had to have cloud in front of it, or the years of putting I in front of every application because it had internet connectivity. So you can get lost in the noise. The companies that do the best are the ones that still solve the fundamental needs of customers and those. And again, wrap it back to innovation ops. That's kind of what we're trying to do. Innovation isn't just copying something. It's truly understanding, bringing that through the organization to drive specific business outcome.
Yeah. So what could be some of the challenges when implementing operation ops from your experience?
I think I've hit on a couple of those. I think the real challenges come from how do I organizationally align people to we're making these changes and we're being more explicit and prescriptive about what we're doing. So it isn't about about implementing a particular process. It's about how do I use the understanding of what jobs there are and the processes to get those jobs done in connecting them. So I think again, it's really more the cultural and training the organization to use those processes and tools to affect those outcomes. Again, it comes down to change management. People, there's different models of even change management, but you really need to make sure people understand why we're changing, give them the tools to make those changes, make the tools to be successful, train them on those tools, and then work with them and coach them to get through that. That's how, successful transformations occur. And if you're willing to do those things, I think the outcomes of going through that can really drive some benefit. And again, it's about sustained competitive advantage, right?
Yeah. So where do you think companies should start if they want to transition to this new culture?
I think they'll the where to look for it again is in general, I think you look for areas that you can contain, that you can work through these processes. Again, it depends, how big you are and things. It could be a division. It could be one specific area. It could be starting with the initial idea, and we're going to start a break. We're really focused on a breakthrough, which in a lot of ways organizationally you separate that from so it doesn't get cluttered. But as that starts growing, and you need more and more of the organization, you start bringing them in and showing how the new model can actually help. And then you start filtering it into the existing business. If you're a small company, I think you can just start with your core products area and grow it. Again, I think big companies are the hardest because you have to find a willing area to get the success, work it out, and at a size where you can get to the wins in a fairly reasonable time frame. I mean, we've all watched many large organizations go through cultural change over many years, and some of it takes 5, 10 years to see those changes. A lot of times people don't have that patience, so you need to target the area that either has the biggest gain or at least the willing participants or leadership that will drive that change.
So, from your perspective, or maybe you've seen this in practice, is it more successful when people start implementing this for maybe teams or departments that are not performing that well, or for the departments that perform really well?
I think the more need comes, the more urgency for change comes from the ones that aren't doing so well. The ones that are doing well, I've been part of those too. It's like, why are you bugging me? I'm dropping 20 points to the bottom line, or I'm generating new products. Why do I have to do something different? I think, and I don't want to say you create a false sense of urgency, but I think what the hardest part with change is creating that urgency to make changes. And those that aren't performing well tend to be a little more like, okay, this isn't working. We need to make a change. And it becomes acknowledged that we need to make a change. The worst place to start is the group or whatever is like, no, we're doing great. See, here are the metrics. We're doing great. And if leadership isn't bought in, then this isn't a bottoms up think model. This is you have to have leadership bought in and going, or at least supporting, giving you air cover, because So I think it tends to be in parts where they're not doing as well. But that may be just my experience. And not well might just mean is there's a level of dissatisfaction, like we could do better.
Yeah.
It isn't like tomorrow we're going to be out of business or out of cash. It could just be this dissatisfaction. We could do better. Our competitors are getting ahead of us. Again, it's that, where's that urgency coming from?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And then you've seen many companies implementing this and transitioning to this. What were some of the maybe surprising outcomes or things that you've seen that and was like, oh, that was unexpected. We didn't know that will be byproduct of this.
Yeah. I think in some of the organizations, I think what I've seen is kind of the unleashing of some of the creativity, not just from the people that they own that job. But once you start bringing people through and they see innovation as not a thing, but it isn't a metric. How many innovations do I have? It's part of what we do. And then they get more creative. I think that's one of the areas that I was kind of been surprised about. I think the other one is generally the outcome that it's not so much a surprise, but it gets much more play is how data driven they can become. The decision making, the flow of information becomes data driven, and you start seeing politics no matter what you do, but you start seeing a lot less of that. And there's still, this is my fiefdom and those sort of things, even in big companies, but you see less of it. And you see more of, we can be objective about this. We can be hard on the problem because now I have data that supports what we're trying to do, and people know where we're trying to go. I think those are the big areas I've seen the most in various organizations. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's great. And then I guess finally, what would be your advice to some leaders out there, organizations who would like to try it and maybe learn more about it? Like where to learn more about innovation ops, or what would be the first steps on how to start implementing some of it?
I think I think the first steps would be, this is more of a framework and a philosophy than, very specific. And it's the same thing with DevOps. It's not like do this, that tends to be a little more prescriptive. But I think the thing is, what are you trying to change? What are the outcomes you're looking for? And organizationally, where could we find a starting point to make these changes? In terms of learning, these ideas are still fairly nascent. So you have to do some digging around the internet. It's starting to come forth. They may not all call it innovation ops, but I think the places to start looking, especially in the tech world, would be around some of the people that are doing new product management software, Atlassian, and some of those type of people that are doing for product people, because they really are talking about how to bring this together in lots of different ways. And I think the other one is just start, asking questions of, here are the jobs we're trying to get done. Who's doing them? And how do I get them done more effectively and more explicitly? I wish there was a whole university course on these things, but at this point, it's fairly new set of ideas that different companies have been trying to pick up, and different thought leaders in the world are trying to move around. I think the other area to think, the other one, and one of the best books I thought on it, on that, they don't call it innovation ops, but you walk through it and you'll go, oh yeah, I see it, is a book called Innovation Accounting. I found that, kind of lays out similar types of things. And the idea was, how do I account for innovation and the metrics? But if you walk through how that outlines, it is really eye-opening. There's a lot of tools for how do I manage and make sure I can account for it. It is not an accounting book, but it kind of thinks through that. I think there's more and more books on discovery. There's plenty on project management and those sort of things. But I think the discovery is the other one where people get lost in the weeds thinking it's just about ideas and list management. How I go find some smart people who give me ideas and then away we go. There's more to it. I think I'm trying to think where else to go. I hadn't thought through this in a while. I can't. There's one other one, and I can't come up with the name in the head. Maybe I can also, we can put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, if you can remember any names or links, just send it over. I'll add them. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mike, and it was a pleasure. A lot of new information, and it was a pleasure having you on. So,
well, it's been a lot of fun getting to know you doing this, and hopefully your listeners will enjoy it. If there's any other questions that come up, you know how to reach me. I'm happy to talk more about it or other topics. I really appreciate all the time you put into it, and I love your podcast, and I wish you the best and happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much. So we'll talk later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.